I'm Josh Schneiderweiler, coming up on Football Today.
Oh, Gareth Bale. This flag has caused quite a stir, as you can imagine, in Spain. Wales, goal for Madrid. In that order, of course, is the flag that he held up in the Madrid media, as saying Bale digs a hole for himself. Marca going full on, though, critical of Bale, saying disrespectful, misguided, ungrateful in that order.
Wales Golf Madrid. It's the latest in a long succession of controversies that has plagued Gareth Bale in the Spanish capital, turning him into persona non grata amongst the Real Madrid faithful. But was it always that way? Today, we determine when it all went wrong for Gareth Bale in Madrid.
Yeah, so this was when Wales had qualified for Euro 2020. They beat Hungary in Cardiff.
Euan McTear covers La Liga for Marca and the La Liga Lowdown Podcast.
All the players are celebrating what is a historic qualification. We have to remember it's not normal for Wales to be qualifying for things. We might think it is because they got into Euro 2016 into the semi-finals, but it's not normal for them to be qualifying. So everybody was jubilant, everybody was happy. The fans were singing this chant, Wales Golf Madrid. Which has come around. And there was a flag with that statement on it in that order, it said at the bottom, and one of the fans handed it to the players. It ended up on the pitch, it ended up in front of Gareth Bale, and as is usually the case, there are many cameras on Gareth Bale, and it ended up back in Spain.
Euan, you live in Madrid and you're Scottish, so I can't imagine that you were watching the Wales-Hungary match. How did you find out about the incident?
I first heard about it on Twitter, and I heard about it through Spanish accounts on Twitter, not people tweeting about it in English, not Welsh fans, not BBC, nothing like that. The first time I saw it was on Twitter, and it was through Spanish journalists, Spanish TV stations, because I think they were the ones who obviously jumped on it the most and were the most excited and, at the same time, most angry about this situation.
So did you know that this was going to be such a big deal?
Oh yeah, definitely. I knew it was going to be a huge deal. I thought it was funny, personally. I thought the joke doesn't come from Bale. The joke comes from the fans. It comes from Mijatovic and a quote he said, which we'll get into. But it wasn't Bale who came up with this. It wasn't Bale who dragged the flag onto the pitch. But it is a funny joke. He was involved in it. He was happy. It was nice just to see Bale smiling, being happy at qualification. But yeah, at the same time, I knew it was going to blow up because people were already pretty unhappy with Bale. Just the fact that he was even playing in these games, because he got injured in the October international break, didn't play a single game for Real Madrid in the month since, and then he was recovered just conveniently in time to go and play for Wales, and it went towards Bale, and I just knew this was going to take it to a whole new level.
So let's take it back to when that controversy actually started. Where does it originate from?
This season, he started as the guy who was supposed to be gone in the summer. Everyone wanted rid of him.
Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? A move to China looks like it could be on lots.
And then the first few weeks of the season, he was excellent. He was our best player by far. Then he gets sent off in the game against Villarreal, 2 silly yellow cards. Then he misses a game because of that suspension. Then he starts to get the injuries that we all know he's had throughout his career. And the fact that he's the most expensive player, the most highly paid player in the squad and not available to play, that just angers the fans. And then when you see something like this, they start to wonder, well, is he unavailable because he's trying to make himself unavailable? Is it because he doesn't really like Real Madrid? Is it because he has other priorities?
But this quote, Wales Golf Madrid, where does that come from?
So that comes from an interview with Paja Mijatovic in El Larguero on Cadena Ser. It's a Spanish radio station. And he basically was talking about it. I got the full quote here. We'll talk about this. He says, I think Bale is a very particular kind of guy. I don't know him personally. I'll make the conclusion that he's quite an unusual person. I think his priorities are his national team, then golf, and then maybe afterwards he thinks about Real Madrid. That was it. That was the only quote. And, he does basically say he thinks these are his priorities in that order. But then the in that order bit was actually added by AS in a tweet that they used to share the article, where they put in that order within the quote marks as if that was part of the original quote. They later apologised for that, said they have to be more careful about things like this, because you have to remember this comes from Wales fans, and obviously most of them don't speak Spanish. They're getting their Spanish news from the likes of AS English, Marca English, other sites, Sport English, the ones that have all these English translations of these kind of quotes that go on Spanish radio late at night.
So when that interview comes out, do you read it and you think, oh, this could be a really big story? Or is it, oh, just another ex-player talking about Gareth Bale?
Exactly, it was the latter. I just kind of thought, okay, here we go again. Someone else making an easy golf reference. Someone else having another dig at Gareth Bale. Someone who prefaces it by saying, I don't know him personally, and then goes, but, and then makes an assumption about a guy who he's just said he doesn't know personally. So at the time, I just thought it was the kind of interview that we hear all the time about Gareth Bale, but this one blew up a little bit more.
And so the viral video comes out. How do people react in Spain?
Not very well, not very well. And I think, again, this is a case of lost in translation, because most of the people are reading this quote and they're reading it in English. They might not understand exactly the English, so they're reading the translation. They're reading the translation in the newspaper. I think this is an important point. Most people see the video, see him jumping around, and they get it. They see it's a joke, they see it's funny, they see it's a moment of jubilation. But the people who read it in the newspaper, in the column inches, it just all of a sudden has a little bit more impact. It seems more serious when you see it in a newspaper column rather than on a video on Twitter, doesn't it?
So obviously there's this perception of him that he cares more about Wales and golf than Madrid. How legitimate are those feelings by Madrid fans?
I think it is quite legitimate, because over the years you have seen just how he doesn't quite fit into the rest of the squad, and then you have seen just how many games he's missed by injury. So there's always been that sense of, is this guy really committed to us? Is he really there for us? And then he might be injured, but you see him playing golf. You see him not taking part in, the Real Madrid culture. He's leaving matches early, but he still has time for golf. I think people do genuinely think that is his order of priorities, that he prefers the Wales national team, then golf, then Real Madrid. Personally, I think he does maybe care a little bit more about Wales, but golf is obviously way after Real Madrid. I mean, this guy, golf is a pastime for him, just the same way Sergio Ramos breeds horses in his free time, or Gerard Piqué organises tennis tournaments, Alvaro Morata, he invests in a gourmet croissant shop. All these players have other things that they do. Golf is the thing that Wales does after the football matches, after his training with Real Madrid. So I think his priorities are Wales, maybe slightly ahead of Real Madrid. He's even said he gets more excited to play for his national team, then Real Madrid, and then golf is way down the line. But I think people know that at heart, but the golf thing is just an easy stick to beat him with.
And so after all of this kind of ensues, does he apologise?
No, and this is the thing where I would criticise Bale. I don't really think the flag is anything that he should be ashamed of. I don't really think anything he's done is particularly bad. He's always been in the press because he's leaving matches 2 or 3 minutes early. I don't think that's a problem. The players don't think that's a problem. Zidane doesn't think that's a problem. And the club doesn't think that's a problem. What is a problem is that when this all blew up, just put a tweet out. Come and explain it. Explain yourself. Explain that it was a moment of jubilation. Explain that you weren't the one who brought the flag onto the pitch, because some people still think that was how it came about. Just put a tweet out there, explain it, put a tweet in Spanish even, and show everyone that you can speak Spanish, because you can. And that would have really just helped to smooth things over. But he hasn't done that. He's been silent on it. He hasn't appeared in any interviews in the mix zone or anything. The last time he spoke to the media was with Wales. I think he could come out and clear all this up and it would all just smooth over a little bit.
So this becomes a big deal, and he comes back from international break, and Real Madrid play a game against Real Sociedad at home at the Bernabeu. What is the reaction by the fans?
It's not good at all. It's not good at all. He's booed before the game. He's whistled before the game when he reads out his name. He's a substitute for this game. His name's read out with the substitutes. Everybody was waiting for that name, whistling him. When he came on, it was even louder. It was reported by AS that it reached 87 decibels, and it certainly was pretty loud. And the general consensus in Spain was that they'd never quite heard anything like this for a home player at the Bernabeu. The fans weren't happy. Some of them even had signs sort of mocking the in that order thing. They had Rodrigo, Vinicius, Lucas, Bale in that order to discuss the right wing position. So the fans weren't happy at all against Real Sociedad. But then he actually played quite well in that game. He came on, he was really involved. He basically helped set up the third goal. The players, his teammates, made a point of going to celebrate with him, and some of the whistles did turn into applause as the match went on.
So this is unprecedented, this level of, vitriol against him and those whistles.
Absolutely. I mean, Bale has been whistled on in the past for missing games through injury, for this, for that, but he's never quite been whistled to this extent. This is an all-new high.
And so what about the midweek game against PSG in the Champions League?
So this is where it's quite interesting because, again, he started on the bench and again he came on as a substitute about the same kind of time. But this time the whistles were clearly not quite as much. There were still a lot of people whistling, still a lot of people booing, but there was a clear sense that the hate towards Bale, the vitriol, had sort of died down a little bit, probably because he had such a good performance when he did come on against Real Sociedad, and also because it's a Champions League night. I think you realise you have to have this player on board. Maybe also the fact that it's a second game. The first game, maybe the fans wanted to send a message to him, but they don't want to do that every single game. Zidane and his teammates have called for fans to stop whistling Bale, and maybe they did pay attention to that. It was clearly not quite as loud, the whistles, when he came on against PSG.
So is that a sign that there might actually be some reason for optimism?
I think so. I think this is the hardest it's ever been for Bale to recover the fans' trust. I don't think there's ever been a chasm quite like this between him and the fans, but I do think he's already gone some way to helping restore that kind of bond. The performance against Real Sociedad and even against PSG, in the very last minute, he had a free kick, he hit it, it went off the post. If that had gone in, you can just imagine the jubilation, the joy at the stadium, everyone chanting for the win. Most fans wouldn't even have realised it was Bale until after they looked up after they were celebrating. So if that had gone in, that could really have accelerated the recovery process between him and the fans. I still think he'll get there eventually, as long as there's not any more controversy popping up in the road in the meantime.
Coming up after the break, when did it all go wrong for Gareth Bale at Madrid? If you like football content with a great mix of education and banter, look no further than the Beautiful Game Podcast. It's a podcast that doesn't just focus on football results. They have entertaining topical debates and look to address social issues such as discrimination and inequality, plus much more. They have gained great respect in the football fraternity with their nuanced views and esteemed guests such as Darren Lewis, Kevin Lisby, Rob Harris, Miguel Delaney, and Martin Keown. So if you're looking to be informed whilst also having a laugh, then look no further than the Beautiful Game Podcast. Follow them on Twitter at podcast_TBG. Now back to Gareth Bale. Let's travel back in time to 2013. Bale is coming off his best season with Tottenham when he scores 21 goals and gets 9 assists. And then he signs for a world record fee of 100 million euros, eclipsing Ronaldo. Were there any issues with that actual transfer?
You sort of just mentioned it. The idea of eclipsing Ronaldo was actually quite a big issue because Ronaldo is the kind of guy who doesn't want to be eclipsed by anyone. And even though transfer market inflation was part of the reason that Bale would just logically cost more than Ronaldo did, it's a few years later, Ronaldo didn't want a player to come in who cost more than he did. And Real Madrid and Tottenham really tried to work to negotiate and to structure the deal in a way that it wouldn't seem like it was more than Ronaldo. A lot of variables, a lot of add-ons.
When did you start this negotiation with Tottenham?
When was it? 110 days?
110 days ago.
110 days ago?
Yeah. And Daniel Levy took us right to the wire, but we got there in the end.
And you saw Darren Eales, who was working at Tottenham at the time. He's now the chairman at Atlanta United. He spoke recently about this transfer and how it almost fell through so many times, partly because they were just trying to structure it so that Tottenham could get the money they wanted, but not in a way that made it seem like they got more than Manchester United got for Ronaldo a few years previously.
But what I find really interesting is Bale really had to push for the move. Obviously, Madrid wanted him, but it was Bale who tried to force the transfer and not really the other way.
Yeah, this was a dream of Bale's at that time. He really wanted to go and challenge himself in Europe, and he was set on Real Madrid. And you see photos of him as a child in the Real Madrid shirt. People talk about how he doesn't feel the Madridismo. He wasn't a big Real Madrid fan. He was a little bit. Obviously, he wasn't growing up in Spain. It wasn't that kind of pure watching them week in, week out kind of connection. But he did always have an admiration for Real Madrid. He did realise they're the club that a player aspires to be at. And he did really want to go. You're right. He pushed for this move because he wanted to be there. And for most of the first few years, you could tell that he really did want to be there.
And the fans, did they take to him when he came?
I think so initially, because it was like a new shiny toy. It was, they had Ronaldo, they'd had a few players who came in that year, Benzema, Kaká, but they hadn't really signed anyone too special. They hadn't really signed another Galactico in the years since. So when Bale came in, this was a little bit overdue. And yeah, of course, he took to him straight away. He started really well, scored in his debut against Villarreal, and in that season, that 2013-14 season, he had some really special moments, didn't he? He scored that goal where he ran around Marc Bartra in the 2014 Copa del Rey final. He scored the goal. Remember, he scored the goal that basically won the Champions League in 2014. Ramos scored the equaliser, of course, but the guy who made it 2-1 in extra time was Gareth Bale.
Gareth Bale may just have won the European Cup for Real Madrid.
We all remember Ronaldo scoring a penalty and ripping his shirt off. But it was 4-1 at that point. The guy who scored the go-ahead goal, it was Bale.
So he scores in these big finals. You'd think that would cement his status amongst the fans, and it's easy to forget, but I remember personally, I was in Madrid at that time. La Decima was the cherished title and all anyone could really think about.
Exactly. They'd waited so long for it since 2002. So this was the thing they'd been waiting for the Jose Mourinho years. They got to the semi-finals every time they fell up just short, couldn't get to the final in 2010, which was held at the Bernabeu. So this had been a goal, an obsession for Real Madrid for so long. And Bale comes along in his first year, he helps them win it. So yeah, this was a big step for Bale, a big step for the club, and at that moment he was an absolute hero. Ronaldo still was the main guy, but Bale was up there because his first year it could hardly have gone much better.
And yet, within the next year, it would all kind of go wrong. The year starts, though, with a 22-game win streak, their famous 22-game win streak that takes them all the way up into the Club World Cup. Then what happens?
Well, then they lost and it ended, and it's not just that Real Madrid's win streak ended, but the time when it ended was the time when Barcelona started to get really good. Remember, 2014-15 is the year Barcelona won the treble, and the first half of the season, Barcelona weren't very good. It was Luis Enrique's first year in charge there at the Camp Nou, and Barcelona were in crisis. The defeat at Real Sociedad round about the turn of the year, it looked like Luis Enrique was going to get sacked. Real Madrid were doing so well, they were winning every game, and it just seemed all rosy for Real Madrid, and then it absolutely collapsed. Barcelona start getting good, Real Madrid start falling apart, and you start to get some infighting. You start to get the media picking out players, turning on players, and I don't think it was anything specific about Bale. I don't think it was anything specific that Bale did, but there was just a sense of panic at that moment at Real Madrid, and they were looking for scapegoats, and Bale was an easy one.
And this kind of comes to the fore in a game against Espanyol when Bale doesn't square the ball to Ronaldo for a goal, and Ronaldo shows his displeasure.
Exactly. It kind of just started as a little thing, and it really did snowball, because after this kind of story about Bale didn't pass to Ronaldo, you started to look and his passes were analysed more and more and more, and every week, every Monday it was, okay, who did Bale pass to, who didn't he pass to, and it became a bit of a thing. It started something really small, and I can't even find the source really of where this kind of big river started. It was just one comment, one game, one pass, and it just spiraled into something far more. And at the same time, other players could have been at fault for the poor form. The coach could have been at fault for the poor form. Ronaldo didn't have his best season, and remember, when they lost 4-0 to Atletico Madrid in the derby, that was the night when Ronaldo had his birthday party. He'd had this big party planned, And they lost 4-0 to Atletico, and he still hosted the party that night, even though they just had one of the most humiliating defeats in the derby in recent memory. And Ronaldo could have been criticised for that. He was by some, but he was still the main man in Madrid, and it was far easier to criticise Bale for not attending the party than Ronaldo for hosting it.
But that only fed more rumors that there was a split between the two and that they didn't like each other, really.
Exactly, you're dead right. It kind of presented this idea that Bale was a little bit of a loner, that Bale just didn't really integrate with the squad, but that might be true. I mean, he kind of stuck to himself. He wasn't the kind of guy who went to all the team dinners. He wasn't the kind of guy who stuck around, had a bit of a chat, had lunch with everyone after training. He was a guy that came in, did his bit, and pretty much went home and spent time with his family and his own friends. There's nothing wrong with that. But at this party, and remember, not everybody was at this party, because not everyone would normally have gone to a Ronaldo birthday party in the Real Madrid squad, and there were a lot of key players in the squad who decided, no, we've just lost 4-0 to Atletico, tonight's not the night to go and be seen somewhere, to go and be photographed by that rapper Kevin Roldan, who Piqué famously brought up at the end of the season when Barcelona won their treble. That moment was a bit of the start of a bit of a split in the dressing room, a bit of a sense of panic at Real Madrid and extra media scrutiny, and it's a bit of a shame that Bale was one of the ones singled out.
And so this all kind of comes to a crescendo in a loss to Barcelona on March 25th in the Clásico. What are the fans' reactions kind of after that?
Not good, and Bale didn't have a good game, that's true, and they sort of singled him out when the players came back to the airport in Madrid. Abused him, they attacked his car, and it was a bit of a similar thing that happened a few months later when they got knocked out of the Champions League against Juventus, and it was a little bit nasty because Real Madrid fans have always been vocal and they've expressed disappointment in the stadium in various ways with signs through the media, but to really go and face-to-face be confronting players after a game at the airport in the car park, it kind of just got a little bit extra nasty, and Bale was the one who was the one getting abused the most. Other players did too, but he was the one at the forefront of it all.
Taking a step back, it almost seems as though fans were almost made to choose between Ronaldo or Bale.
I think that's a fair way to put it. It became a thing of you have to pick one. Are you a Ronaldo guy or are you a Bale guy? And as much as I think Bale's achievements have been underplayed, it's true that they don't match what Ronaldo's done for the club. You know, the all-time record scorer, the guy that turned up in all the big moments. And if you had to pick between them, it's logical to pick Ronaldo, but I don't think there should have had to be this sense of having to pick one of them. But that's kind of, yeah, you're right, that's kind of how it became.
He seems like kind of the perfect lightning rod for the media, especially in Spain, because he's quite an easy target since those papers know that he's not exactly going to speak back in Spanish, and he's an introvert or at least shy to talk to the media.
Exactly. He's not really going to talk to the media anyway, so if you annoy him, it's not like he's going to deny your request for interviews because he's not talking to you anyway. So he's an easy target and he's an easy source of clicks, to be honest. It's been the same with James Rodriguez. I mean, you look at the players who are most popular on social media. James Rodriguez at Real Madrid, he's got 95 million fans across all his platforms. Gareth Bale, he's the second most popular. He's got 89 million across all his platforms. And these are the players who there's the most interest in. These are the popular players at Real Madrid. So obviously that means you get more clicks if you write about them because they're the ones with all the fans. They're the ones with all the interest. So it makes sense to thrive and jump on every single little story about the guys who are the most popular, because if you write something criticising your backup centre-back for playing golf, nobody cares. If you write something about Gareth Bale playing golf, about how he doesn't speak the language, everybody cares, everybody clicks, and you get the money.
Where do we think this might end up in the future?
I think it'll end up with Bale leaving Real Madrid sooner rather than later, but there is talk about him leaving in January. I don't really see that as happening because they tried to get rid of him in the summer. There wasn't really a buyer, and if you're the way Zidane talks, he's not cast him to the side. Zidane's talking about how he's important for the team. If you're going to sell him in 6 weeks, why would you be talking like that right now? So I think Bale will stay for a while, and I think if Real Madrid have a good season, and going by performances, there's every chance they could, then Bale can, win them, many of the fans back over again. He's the kind of guy that scores in big moments, and you can just see him scoring the goal that wins the league title, scoring the goal that wins a Clásico, scoring the goal that wins a Champions League or a cup final. because he's done it before. And if he does that, obviously he'll be the man of the moment, and that can mend some bridges. But I don't think he'll be there in 2 or 3 years' time. He's the kind of guy that I think is on the way out of Real Madrid, and hopefully he goes out with a bit of a happier ending.
The Gareth Bale situation seems kind of like a great example for our decade and kind of even potentially going forward, in that the optics of what happened off the field can really shadow what happens on the field.
I think that's true. I think that is something we might see more and more of, where the players, they want to look like they're working hard. They want to make the runs that get picked up on TV. They want to make the passes that get picked up on TV, even if they're not necessarily the best thing for the team in a certain moment. And that might become more and more of a thing. You even see it with like sponsors and things like this. It's almost creeping more and more into the action on the pitch. And it's also going to be a thing, going back to what I said about the players who are the most popular, it's a bit of a worrying thing, I think, for the decade ahead, is who are the next superstars going to be? Who are the next most popular players going to be? You look at guys at Real Madrid right now that are out on loan, Takefusa Kubo, Martin Odegaard. These guys, every time there's a story about them, everybody jumps on it, everybody reads it, everybody clicks it. Right now it's mostly positive stories because they're young guys and they're doing well. But what happens when they have bad days? There might be a temptation to overblow certain minor controversies involving these players because you know how popular these guys are. So it is a bigger debate. It's not just about Bale, because I think the Bale situation goes on at almost every club. I think every club has a Bale, but Bale being at Real Madrid, the biggest club in the world, it's the one that extends into football chatter in general.
You can follow all of Euan McTear's coverage of La Liga on Marca and the La Liga Lowdown Podcast. The show is produced by John McKenzie. I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, and this was Football Today. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on iTunes and share it with a friend. See you next time.